Hey guys, it's Kaylee and welcome back to Hippie in a Suit, where I talk about sustainability because I dream of a world where women's right to make choices about her own body is not a controversial concept. This is another video in my SDG series where I explain each of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. If you haven't already watched my primer on the SDGs, I do recommend checking that out first so that you understand the overall framework and what it's trying to achieve. Today, we're zooming in on SDG 5, which is focused on achieving gender equality and empowering all women and girls. This particular goal has 9 targets and 14 indicators that look at all dimensions of gender equality, including economic, political, and societal inclusion and participation, eliminating violence and harmful practices against women, and ensuring sexual and reproductive health. As always, I prepare a blog post that explains this topic in writing, provides links to my research, and has resources where you can learn more. It also includes a few organizations who work in this space that you may choose to follow or support if it's of interest to you. Even though I'm not American and I don't live in the US, I wanted to acknowledge that in this moment, December 2021, there is a huge focus on women's rights to choose, and therefore I have included a number of American-focused organizations as well as more global entities in that list of organizations working on this. You can find that in the description box below. All right, with all of that said, let's dive in. Now, as you know, I usually start these videos off by going right into the first target, but I wanted to pause and take a quick moment to address the notion of gender because I have received a number of questions about this. Now, this is not my particular area of expertise, but I did want to provide a little bit of background based on my understanding and research. You'll notice that SDG 5 specifically refers to women and girls and not to females, except when it comes to the topic of genital mutilation. Why is that? Well, being a male or a female is a biological determination, meaning it refers to the chromosomes and sexual organs that one is born with. Whereas being a woman is a gender determination, which is much more fluid, complex, and subjective. The way SDG 5 is written is for all gender equality and for the most part includes anyone identifying as a woman or a girl regardless of the biological sex they were born with. However, an important caveat from what I have read is that in practice, most or many programs working on gender equality are not intersectional or inclusive to all women, for example, trans women. So when I speak about women and girls, I am being inclusive with the use of the term, but I think it is important to recognize that that might not always be the case in practice. And this is why we have the Leave No One Behind principle in the 2030 Agenda, which aims to put the most vulnerable first, and it's so crucial that we do that. So now that that's clear, let's move into the targets. Target 5.1, end all forms of discrimination against all women and girls everywhere. Discrimination is defined as the unjust or prejudicial treatment of a certain category of people. This target looks at whether or not legal frameworks are in place to promote, enforce, and monitor equality and non-discrimination on the basis of sex. Specifically, it looks at legal frameworks that address 4 major dimensions: public life, which includes the ability to vote, hold public office, and have equal rights as a citizen. Second, violence against women, which looks at if there are laws that punish violent acts against women and if they are enforced. Third, employment and economic benefit, such as the ability to be hired, receive equal pay, and parental leave. And finally, marriage and family, such as a minimum age for marriage, and that generally women do have the same rights as men in relationships. According to the most recent SDG report done by UN Statistics, discriminatory laws and legal gaps continue to prevent women from enjoying their full human rights based on data collected in 95 countries across these 4 areas of law in 2020. In the area of overarching legal frameworks and public life, more than half of countries with data lacked quotas for women in national parliaments, and close to 1/5 maintained some sort of discriminatory nationality laws. In the area of violence against women, 83% of countries included budgetary commitments to implement legislation addressing violence against women, but 63% lacked rape laws based on the principle of consent. In the area of employment and economic benefits, over 90% of countries mandated non-discrimination on the basis of gender in employment, but almost half of them continued to restrict women from working in certain jobs or industries. In the area of marriage and family, almost a quarter of countries failed to grant women equal rights with men to enter into marriage and initiate divorce, and 3/4 of countries did not stipulate the age of 18 as a minimum age for marriage for women and men, with no exceptions. Target 5.2. Eliminate all forms of violence against all women and girls in public and private spheres, including trafficking and sexual and other types of exploitation. This target focuses on eliminating physical, sexual, or psychological violence against women both within their intimate partner relationships and by people other than their intimate partners. Physical violence consists of acts aimed at physically hurting a victim. Sexual violence is defined as any sort of harmful or unwanted sexual behavior that is imposed on someone, whether it be by use of physical force or intimidation or coercion. And psychological violence consists of any act that induces fear or emotional distress. It includes a range of behaviors that encompass acts of emotional abuse, such as being frequently humiliated in public or intimidated, as well as many controlling behaviors. This target is measured by 2 indicators: the proportion of women and girls aged 15 or older subject to violence in the last 12 months. One that looks specifically at their partners in intimate relationships, and the other that looks at any other aggressor. Nearly 1 in 3 women, or 736 million women, have been subjected to physical and/or sexual violence at least once since the age of 15, the majority of which was perpetrated by a current or former intimate partner. In fact, more than 640 million women have been subjected to intimate partner violence, which is about 26% of all women aged 15 and older. If we look at violence by other aggressors, evidence has shown that globally, an estimated 7% of women have been sexually assaulted by someone other than a partner at some point in their lives. However, the true prevalence of non-partner sexual violence is likely to be much higher, considering that there's particular stigma related to reporting these kinds of violence. We do tend to see differences depending on the region. There are consistently higher rates of violence in low and lower middle income regions compared with high income regions. These variations are likely due to the challenges that women face in leaving abusive relationships, such as insufficient economic resources, limited availability and access to formal support services, weak social support networks, and fear of repercussions associated with social stigma. 137 women are killed by someone close to them every single day. It is estimated that of the 87,000 women who were intentionally killed in 2017, more than 1/3, or 30,000, were killed by their current or former intimate partner. Women and girls also account for 72% of trafficking victims. Unfortunately, the pandemic has only exacerbated these issues, so these statistics are actually getting worse, unlike many of the other SDGs where we are seeing consistent improvements. I won't get into all the details in this particular video because I already have one that explains some of these pandemic dynamics in detail, and I'll link that above as well so you can check it out if you're interested. Target 5.3. Eliminate all harmful practices such as child, early, and forced marriage, and female genital mutilation. Obviously, this target, as was the case with the last one, is quite upsetting and difficult to talk about. Child marriage refers to any formal marriage or informal union between a child under the age of 18 and an adult or another child. Girls who marry before the age of 18 are more likely to experience domestic violence and less likely to remain in school. Another harmful practice, female genital mutilation, or FGM, refers to all procedures involving partial or total removal of the female external genitalia or other injury to the female genital organs for non-medical reasons. This target aims to completely eliminate both of these harmful practices. Over the last 10 years, the rates of child marriage have decreased from 1 in 4 girls 10 years ago to approximately 1 in 5 today. Before the pandemic, more than 100 million girls were expected to enter into a marriage over the next decade, but estimates now expect up to another 10 million girls to be added to that number. On FGM, more than 200 million girls and women alive today have been cut in 30 countries in Africa, the Middle East, and Asia where FGM is concentrated. Overall, the practice has been declining steadily over the last 3 decades, with around 1 in 3 girls aged 15 to 19 having undergone the practice versus 1 in 2 girls in the late 1980s. So again, we're seeing some progress, but these are extremely harmful practices, so they must be eliminated. Target 5.4. Recognize and value unpaid care and domestic work through the provision of public services, infrastructure, and social protection policies, and the promotion of shared responsibility within the household and the family as nationally appropriate. Unpaid care work refers to work that contributes to meeting the basic emotional and physical needs of individuals, families, and communities. It includes caring for children, elderly people, and people who've fallen ill, as well as housework, preparing and cooking food, collecting firewood, fuel, and water. Unpaid care work makes it nearly impossible for women to fully realize their economic opportunities, and this is why the provision of public services, infrastructure, and social protection are so crucial. These include things like affordable childcare, strong healthcare systems, social safety nets, and more. According to the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, unpaid work can be addressed on a triple R framework: recognition, making it visible, reduction of tasks overall, and redistribution so that men share in more of the household duties. Worldwide, about 75% of the world's unpaid care work is carried out by women, and women spend about 2.5 times as many hours on unpaid care work as men. Having said that, things are trending in the right direction, and men are doing more unpaid work every year. It is also worth noting that both men and women have taken on more household work during the pandemic, especially when it comes to child education. Target 5.5. Ensure women's full and effective participation and equal opportunities for leadership at all levels of decision-making in political, economic, and public life. This target looks at the proposition of women in leadership positions, both in government and in the workforce, with a goal of them having equal opportunity and being equally represented. So where do we stand on this today? Well, the global average of women in national parliaments is on an upward trend, but it's still only 25.6% at the country level and 36.3% at the local government level. At the current rate, it would take no fewer than 40 years to achieve gender parity in national governments. Only 23 countries have at least 40% female representation in their parliaments. On the business side, though women accounted for 39% of the global labor force in 2019, they occupied only 28.2% of managerial positions. Target 5.6. Ensure universal access to sexual and reproductive health and reproductive rights as agreed in accordance with the Program of Action of the International Conference on Population and Development and the Beijing Platform for Action and the outcome documents for these review conferences. The sexual and reproductive health and rights agreed in the 2 documents referenced in this target are multifaceted and include many dimensions. For example, making reproductive health services accessible, including family planning, education and services for prenatal care, safe delivery, and postnatal care, prevention and appropriate treatment of infertility, abortion, including prevention of abortion and the management of the consequences of abortion, treatment of reproductive tract infections, sexually transmitted diseases, and other reproductive health conditions, information and counseling on human sexuality, reproductive health, and responsible parenthood, and active discouragement of harmful practices such as female genital mutilation. This target is measured by the proportion of women aged 15 to 49 years who make their own informed decisions regarding sexual relations, contraceptive use, and reproductive health care, and the number of countries with laws and regulations that guarantee full and equal access to women and men aged 15 years and older to sexual and reproductive health care, information, and education. According to the United Nations Population Fund, only 55% of married or in-union women aged 15 to 49 make their own decisions regarding sexual and reproductive health and rights, based on data from 57 countries. This varies greatly by region, with less than 40% feeling empowered in the Middle East and Western Africa versus 80% in some countries in Europe, Southeast Asia, Latin America, and the Caribbean. For the second measurement, there is less data available, but in a study of 75 countries, they had, on average, 73% of the laws and regulations needed to guarantee full and equal access to sexual and reproductive health rights. However, policies related to sexual and reproductive education were severely lacking, with countries having, on average, 57% of enabling laws, regulations, or national policies that make sexuality education a mandatory component of the national school curriculum. The gender equality goal also features 3 means of implementation targets, which cover women's right to economic resources and land ownership, access to technology, and enforcement of policies and legislation. I'll quickly go over those so you know what they are. Target 5A is to undertake reforms to give women equal rights to economic resources as well as access to ownership and control over land and other forms of property, financial services, inheritance, and natural resources in accordance with national laws. Sub to this is the proportion of total agricultural population with ownership or secure rights over agricultural land by sex, and the share of women among owners or right bearers for agricultural land by type of tenure. As you can see, there's a big focus here on land rights, and that's because owning land or owning property really gives a lot of economic power. Target 5B. Enhance the use of enabling technology, in particular information and communication technology, to promote and empower women. Target 5C. Adopt and strengthen sound policies and enforceable legislation for the promotion of gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls at all levels. Okay, wow, that was a lot and also was quite heavy. So let's summarize and close this one out. SDG 5 looks at all dimensions of gender equality, including economic, political, and societal inclusion and participation, eliminating violence and harmful practices against women, and ensuring sexual and reproductive health. Target 5.1 aims to end all forms of discrimination against all women and girls everywhere. It is measured in 4 main areas: public life, violence against women, employment and economic benefit, marriage, and family. While the statistics vary, overall, discriminatory laws and legal gaps continue to deprive women of their human rights. Target 5.2 seeks to eliminate all forms of violence against all women and girls. Unfortunately, nearly 1 in 3 women, or 736 million women, have been subjected to physical and/or sexual violence at least once since the age of 15, the majority of which is perpetrated by a current or former intimate partner. Target 5.3 aims to eliminate early and forced marriage and female genital mutilation. Rates of child marriage have decreased from 1 in 4 girls about 10 years ago to approximately 1 in 5 today. And FGM has also declined steadily over the last 3 decades, with around 1 in 3 girls aged 15 to 19 today versus 1 in 2 in the late 1980s in the countries where it's most prevalent. Both harmful practices remain major issues and need to be eliminated. Target 5.4 is all about recognizing and valuing unpaid care work. Women currently spend about 2.5 times as many hours on unpaid care work as men. The pandemic has increased the amount of unpaid care work done by both women and men, but it has unfairly fallen on women and affects their economic opportunities. Target 5.5 strives to ensure women's participation and equal opportunities in leadership at all levels in politics, economics, and public life. Only 23 countries currently have at least 40% representation of women in their parliaments, and women occupy only 28.2% of managerial positions. Target 5.6 aims to provide universal access to sexual and reproductive health and reproductive rights. Globally, only 55% of married or in-union women aged 15 to 49 make their own decisions regarding sexual and reproductive health and rights. This goal also features 3 means of implementation targets, which cover women's rights to economic resources and land ownership, access to technology, and enforcement of policies and legislation. And that's SDG 5. And that's it. That's all I have for you today. If you learned something in this video, give it a like. It really helps out the channel. As always, thank you so much for being here. And don't forget to check out the blog post if you want more information or to continue learning about this topic. See you in the next one. And until then, keep fighting the good fight. Bye.